Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. Today is Friday, the 19th of August, 2022. We've got lots to discuss, and without further ado, let's tell you what we will be talking about during the course of the show. We'll begin with a top electoral body official in the Indian administered occupied Jammu and Kashmir that has said that people from any part of India who are living ordinarily in the region are now eligible to vote. That includes all the other different people from different other regions of India. Also, the Indian armed forces personnel who are stationed within the region that can now vote, which is a major change as far as the whole demography of illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is concerned. And of course, it is a step in the direction that the BJP and Narendra Modi wanted to take. The Foreign Office has taken out a strong rebuttal as far as that is concerned, categorically rejecting this attempt of pre-poll rigging and manipulation in the region. This is going to be our leading segment. We will also be talking about Bilkis Bano, whose culprits have been set free. Bilkis Bano, of course, was a victim of gang rape, and her child, as an unborn child, was also killed by them way back in 2002 in the Gujarat riots. This is our first segment, ladies and gentlemen. Our second segment of the day concerns the World Humanitarian Day. Today, the 19th of August, is the World Humanitarian Day. We need to be extremely vigilant of our humanity, of the different sects and the different parts of our humanity that are here, and the different methodology that we can apply in order to not only safeguard their interests but also save them from future disasters. This is going to be our second story. Then we will be talking about Professor Dr. Akbar Ali Khan, who performed a just awake brain surgery and then let the patient leave the premises after a couple of hours, which is quite rare as far as just awake surgeries are concerned. And the patient seems to be fine, and the surgery went apparently well. So we are going to discuss that and talk to the doctor who was in charge of that. Then we'll be talking about Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif Saab, who's kicked off a national anti-polio vaccination campaign by administering polio drops to children today in Islamabad. Also, at the same time, he has also chaired a national task force as far as polio eradication in the country is concerned, and he has talked about the importance of polio eradication from Pakistan in the wake of some of the cases that have been coming from the country. And then finally, we'll be talking about Pakistan and Iran. Ladies and gentlemen, both the neighboring countries, friendly countries, have pledged to finalize and sign a free trade agreement within 6 months to remove barriers and to further bolster trade. This was discussed in a meeting between the two ministers of the two countries. This is going to be our last story. Let's begin without further ado about our first segment, and that is the change as far as the demography of illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is concerned in the wake of recent decision that has been made for people who are not even the residents of illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir to be allowed to vote, and that includes the Indian forces personnel that are stationed there as well. What is the following report?
India's settler colonialism in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir begins to show the true colours. Indian occupation authorities are granting voting rights to Indian citizens ordinarily residing in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. According to Hurriyat leaders, granting voting rights to non-state subjects would drastically change the region's political landscape, besides influencing the outcome of the election results in the future. The purpose behind this new scheme was to grant political leverage and tilt power of balance in favour of the BJP that has since long been dreaming to install Hindu chief minister in the state, as per the assertions made by Hurriyat leaders. Earlier, the Delimitation Commission, which was tasked with redrawing boundaries of assembly and parliamentary constituencies in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, made very controversial decisions. On the 5th of May, a government-appointed Delimitation Commission announced 90 assembly constituencies for the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir, excluding Ladakh, with 43 seats for Jammu and 47 for Kashmir. It granted greater representation to the Muslim-majority region's Hindu areas. According to 2011 census, Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir has a population of 12.5 million people, 68.31% of them Muslims and 28.43% Hindus. A majority of those Muslims live in the Kashmir Valley, while Hindus predominantly live in Jammu.
Yasir Abbas, international relations expert, joins us online. Yasir, thank you very much to have joined us. Yasir, when you look at this change in demography as far as the Indian illegally occupied region is concerned, was it something that was expected in the wake of all the other decisions that have also been taken against the people and the whole region?
Well, thank you so much, Omar, for having me on the show. And regarding what's happening in Kashmir, what I call it partisan gerrymandering, basically changing the constituencies in the region in order to ensure that the local people are emasculated politically. I think this was coming ever since Modi came into the government. They were basically committed to do each and everything to tarnish and to basically undermine the unique status of Kashmir, which was long accepted as a bilateral dispute between Pakistan and India. But since the events of August, we have seen that how the region's autonomy has been challenged, first of all, and then followed by a deliberate state-sponsored attempt to basically change the demography of the region. And now moving towards a complete, what I would refer it to as a political isolation of the locals, through which people with no background in Kashmir, with no property in Kashmir, with no identity in Kashmir, will have a say in determining the electoral direction of the region. I think this was coming, and this is Modi's approach towards Kashmir at best.
But at this, looking at this approach towards Narendra Modi, and also looking at the way he is putting forward laws and resolutions that undermine any kind of progress in the region, or of course for the Muslims of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, do you feel there's going to be some kind of opposition? We've seen the opposition come from within the occupied region. We've seen the opposition come through a very strong statement and rebuttal by the Foreign Office. But is this enough? Do you think the important world bodies also need to react to all of this? Because if this is the way things go, then in a couple of years, what say 1 or 2 years, the Muslims will no longer be in a majority, will they?
Absolutely, and it's extremely alarming to see the international community basically giving a deaf ear to what's happening in Kashmir, and it basically, makes everyone wonder that what are those human rights parameters which are used when it's about Muslim communities suffering across the world, and especially in the case of Kashmir. And it's pertinent to mention here that in this case, the primary actor which is leading the democratic decadence is India, and which claims to be the largest democracy in the world. It's unfortunate that so far we haven't seen anything substantial from the international community, and mere condemnation at this stage, I mean, this is not going to change. They are not enough to change the Modi mindset and the Modi status quo, which is in New Delhi, and which thrives on instability, which thrives on basically persecution of Muslim community in India and at the same time in Kashmir. And the Kashmir approach of Modi is fundamentally driven by this anti-Muslim mantra, and I'm sure that things would have been different if Kashmir would have been a disputed territory, but a major region dominated by, let's say, Hindu communities of India. But in this case, because the population is dominant of the Muslim community, we have seen how Modi is treating Muslims elsewhere in India, where state level basically threats, state level political basically ownership.
Basically, to cut it short, Yasir, there are basically no rights anymore of any kind of minority, whether it be Muslims, especially the Muslims, but also the Sikhs and the Dalits. Which brings me to the fact when you said that India was the largest, so-called largest democracy. India is also supposed to be one of the biggest pluralistic societies, and this was also said by Narendra Modi Saab at the G7 conference some time back, which, how should I say, I mean, it is a contradiction in itself, just like the largest democracy in the world. This brings me to the reaction that has come from the Foreign Office. In the Foreign Office reaction, it talks about 3 changes which are completely rejected by Pakistan: the formulation of the so-called Delimitation Commission and its baseless report, issuance of fake Kashmiri domiciles to millions of outsiders, and changes to the property laws. Now, these are three issues that are changing the whole way Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir residents are living and the future of these people as well. Will there be any kind of change in these 3 points that have been enhanced and stated by the Foreign Office?
I don't think so, because we have to understand that these steps, they didn't come, overnight. It's a process which started in 2019. And if you connect the dots now, it basically makes sense that it was not just about changing the status of Kashmir. With the change in the status, there was a clear plan crafted out in order to ensure that the population of the local indigenous Kashmiris should be disturbed through artificial demographic, shifts in the region, and then gradually allowing them to do business and own properties in the Kashmir region, and at the same time changing the property law altogether and ensuring that all Indians basically can have the same property rights in the Kashmir as the Kashmiris do. So we have to understand this. This is not an overnight step. They have given a lot of thought about it, and they have increased their military presence accordingly in the Kashmir, because they know that there will be a resistance. But unfortunately, the resistance has been suppressed through the presence of large Indian troops.
But the resistance has been suppressed not since 2019, to be very frank, Yasir, since decades. It has only been enhanced, the suppression has been enhanced since the abrogation of Articles 370 and 35A and the presence of more than 1 million Indian forces within the region, who are now eligible to vote as well for the elections. I mean, what more can you say? I mean, even the forces personnel that are there from all over India within Kashmir, next year they will be able to vote in these local elections, and so they will change the demography of the entire region. Is the world listening? Will the world react?
Unfortunately, I don't see any consensus developing on what are the yardsticks basically to measure the human rights standards when it is being applied in Kashmir. I don't see it changing unless and until leading capitals such as Washington, such as London, and Russia and China, they will come basically, they will basically challenge India on their actions in Kashmir. I don't see any policy shift happening in New Delhi. And frankly, New Delhi has, it seems that it has sorted, because we don't see any strong voice emanating from, Pakistan. We don't see any strong voice emanating from the OIC. We don't see any voice emanating from the United Security Council. So it gives a carte blanche to basically New Delhi to do what it desires and what it pleases.
Regards to here, I'll contradict you, because Pakistan has issued a very strong statement as a rejection of the so-called attempts of pre-poll rigging and manipulation in the held region. What the Foreign Office has also said, Yasir, in its statement, it says that it calls on India to A, release the political prisoners detained on trumped-up charges, halt human rights violation in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, lift the brutal military siege, let the Kashmiris exercise their legitimate right to self-determination. This is not the first time that the Foreign Office has said this. It has said this multiple times. We have said this on multiple fora, including the United Nations as well. What I want to understand is, will this bring a change whatsoever as far as India's designs towards the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir region is concerned, or would we be just silent spectators onto what is happening and what will happen?
Well, I think the international community has to basically come forward. I mean, as you mentioned, Pakistan is doing its best, but I still think that Pakistan needs to do more. I think our lobbying in all the leading capitals needs to be intensified, because what's happening in Kashmir is basically, we can easily draw parallels to what has been happening in the past across the world, and that has led to genocide. And people who study genocide closely and who do research in all those areas, they are basically indicating to us a situation where, God forbid, something similar could happen in India, especially in Kashmir. So I think we need to do more. The international community needs to do more. And at the same time, we have to basically support the indigenous local voices within India, within the Kashmir, who are basically fighting criticizing the current Indian administration, especially all the voices within India. And as you mentioned earlier, that India is a pluralistic society, and that's what the Modi mentioned. And I think what's happening in India is basically nothing but a mockery of pluralism as we speak. So I think that the international community has to basically come forward very stringently in order to make India accountable and to basically direct the Indian government to basically reconsider their actions with regards to Kashmir specifically, and overall their conduct towards all minorities in the Indian state.
All right. Yasir, also I'd like to refer you to the not only the lack of pluralism or democratic values, but also the lack of human values within India, within illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and within India. I would like to refer you to Bilkis Bano's case. You remember in 2002 when she was gang raped and her unborn child was killed. Then those perpetrators were put behind bars, and now they've been set free. What kind of precedence does this set for a country that calls itself shining India?
Well, again, you have to see it from a context. In this case, the victim is a Muslim. And in this case, we have also seen that successive decisions, whether be it related to the Babri Mosque, be it related to other vital issues that are directly concerning the Muslims, we have seen that there is a biased approach of Indian judiciary. And the way the release was celebrated and the way, things were basically celebrated by the Hindutva Janta over there, it is something alarming. And the message India is sending to the international community is simple, that the Hindutva ideology has penetrated deeply into the Indian system, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's their foreign policy, whether there is local government. All approaches of the state, they reflect an inherent biasness towards minorities and Muslims specifically. And the case of Bilkis Bano is basically a shining example of, a miscarriage of justice happening in one of the largest democracies, the so-called democracies in the world.
And this is not just this is one of the prominent cases, but there are hundreds and hundreds of such cases that we've discussed also in previous shows, and there are so many cases that have not come to the limelight. Nevertheless, I don't think India needs to be called a champion of human rights or a pluralistic society or a democracy for that matter. Thank you so very much, Yasir Abbas, to have joined us, to have talked to us about the latest changes that have been made as far as the Indian illegally occupied region are concerned, which gives the right for people who who are not residents of the Indian held valley to vote, even the personnel of the armed forces, which will give the right to 2.5 million or so people more to vote for Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir's local elections next year. Let's come to our second segment, and that concerns World Humanitarian Day. Today is the World Humanitarian Day, ladies and gentlemen. Humanity is engulfed with so many challenges right now, and we need to come as one in order to tackle those. More in the following report.
World Humanitarian Day is celebrated every year on 19th of August. The day is recognized globally to pay tribute and homage to the brave hearts who leave no stone unturned to come forward and work towards a humanitarian cause. On the 19th of August 2003, a bomb attack on the Canal Hotel in Baghdad, Iraq, killed 22 humanitarian aid workers, including the UN Special Representative of the Secretary General for Iraq. 5 years later, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution designating 19th of August as World Humanitarian Day. Each year, WHD focuses on a theme bringing together partners from across the humanitarian system to advocate for the survival, well-being and dignity of the people affected by crises and for the safety and security of aid workers. The day marks the sacrifice of humanitarian workers who lost their precious lives while working for humanitarian needs and causes. The 2022 World Humanitarian Day campaign shines light on the thousands of volunteers, professionals and crisis-affected people who deliver urgent healthcare, shelter, food, protection, water and much more. This year, World Humanitarian Day focuses on the theme, It Takes a Village, which highlights how aid workers come together in a collective effort to alleviate extreme need.
We've now been joined by Nadir Barech. He's the Chief Operating Officer of PPAF. Nadir Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Nadir Saab, today is a very important day. That is the World Humanitarian Day. Since 2003, this day is celebrated every year. This day to remind us of humanity, to remind us of our responsibility as a responsible world, as a responsible part of this world, do you feel this day is important still in 2022, and how important is it?
Well, thank you very much. The day is very important because you can see now in this monsoon region, even Pakistan currently is in severe flooding situation, and which started in July, and we still confront, the flash floods, and the rescue efforts are still undergoing. And even in this year in Pakistan, as you may know, that our army soldiers, General, the Corps Commander of Balochistan, and some other soldiers, they also died during the flood response in some areas of Balochistan. So this is very relevant. We have to pay tribute to all Shuhada, to all those who martyred during making efforts to provide relief, rescue, and early recovery to the affected of disasters. And Pakistan, as you know, has confronted more than 135 various kind of catastrophes and incidents of disaster in Pakistan, which has claimed lives of more than 10,000 people. It has cost us more than $3.8 billion in Pakistan. So it's a very relevant day today. And this year, as you know, that the worst flash flood has hit the country, and it's worse than 2010 flood that had taken more than 25% area of Pakistan. And this year, this flood, which still continues in some part of Pakistan, so it has hit more than half of Pakistan. So it has resulted in death of more than 110 people.
By this, I understand this very well, Mr. Barech. Prior to joining the Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund, you were also serving as a CEO for the Balochistan Rural Support Program. You understand Balochistan much more than many like us do. How important is it for us to take care of a province such as Balochistan? And under the recent floods, when Balochistan is the worst affected region because of the subsequent droughts and the loss of crops and cattle and people's lives, what measures need to be taken so that things like these do not happen in the future? How can we be future ready?
Well, I think we have to work mostly on disaster mitigation, disaster prevention. And for that purpose, one is that we need to, as this year the theme of Humanitarian Day is also takes a village, means that all people who are affected by any catastrophe, they are humanitarian workers. They try to survive themselves. They try to survive their friends. So in that aspect, I think what we need to do is we need to prepare communities, we need to prepare district disaster management authorities, I think, so that the not only mitigation, prevention starts from the community level, but also whenever in case of any emergency, they are prepared to respond to it immediately. We need to work on infrastructure, like most of the plain areas in current catastrophe, the plain areas of Balochistan, Sindh, and southern Punjab. So they are badly hit because water is inundated in those areas. So we need to work out, for shelter particularly, we have to raise the from ground these new shelters that need to be constructed in those areas so that we can avoid it in future also. Because we see every time when flood hits, these areas are inundated with water. So we need to take measures. And also we need to work on flood protection walls in various areas. Because our country is, agro-pastoral economy. We depend on agriculture and livestock, and all these, catastrophes, particularly flash flood and drought, they hit our agriculture and livestock badly. So we need to work out, mechanisms at the community level. We have to work on infrastructure. We have to work on preparedness at community level, at district level. I think that these are some of the priorities that we need to look at. Secondly, I think it's also responsibility of the world this is all effect of climate change. As we are well aware that we are only contributed to carbon emission 0.9%, whereas we are the eighth worstly affected country in the world. So I think the world also needs to take concrete action, concrete steps to mitigate the effect of climate change.
All right, Mr. Barech, what role are organizations such as yourself, the PPAF, doing in order to alleviate the current conditions of the people in Balochistan and other regions?
Well, as you know, the Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund, we work with more than 130 civil society organizations, and there are more than 140,000 community institutions. There are more than 450,000 groups that we have formed over a period of 2 decades through our partner organizations. And disaster preparedness, disaster mitigation has remained one of the tasks. Secondly, at the Union Council level, we have community organized. So currently, all these community institutions, they are obviously with self-help approach. They are trying to rescue people. They are trying to mobilize some local philanthropy to address the immediate need of communities. Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund, we are at the forefront. I myself was in Balochistan and in Sindh province. I just returned from Sindh yesterday. So we have started with the 250 million rupees grant to our partners. And we are focusing mainly on food, shelter, non-food item. And what I have seen in the field also that there is dire need of, medical treatment of people who have been affected with waterborne diseases. There are
and
skin
also the
diseases,
cattle, sir. Also the cattle that has been severely affected.
Cattle, obviously.
There as well.
Yeah, we have started, vaccination and treatment of animal also, cattle and livestock in those districts. We are also providing tarpaulin sheet at least so that they can protect themselves from the ongoing rain. And then we obviously will think of the tent. We have also provided the water treatment tablets, that purifies water, because in these areas they are inundated in water. Most of the water supply schemes have been damaged. But I think the catastrophe is quite large. The efforts that we are making are quite small compared to the catastrophe. And so far, international humanitarian community has also not mobilized. The government is striving with the rescue operation because rain still continues, flash flood still continues. So it's bigger catastrophe, and the communities at large, all those people who have been affected, they are lying, under the sky, and there are heavy rains going on in those areas. I was quite astonished to see, people in those areas. They said, previously we used to have 3 time meals, but now we have only 1 time meal. So with the ration we provided, they just a kind of smile that came on their faces, a happiness that at least we'll be able to eat 2 times meal. So that's condition in the field. So I think we all, it's not only the government of Pakistan's responsibility, but I think all organization, institution, private sector in Pakistan and community at large have to join hands to address this catastrophe, particularly now in this rescue and relief phase. So we have to be quite active, every one of us.
All right, Nadir Saab, you talked about the disaster that is quite huge and the efforts that are not as fruitful as they need to be. Much more needs to be done. This is what I understand from what you've just told us. In this scenario, don't you feel the United Nations, because today is the World Humanitarian Day and this is a day that is under the auspices of UNOCHA, don't you feel the United Nations also needs to take cognizance of this and help countries like Pakistan out? I also understand that the United States has given some kind of a fund for the people of Balochistan as well, who are afflicted by the flood, but more needs to be done by other countries. Do you feel we need to contact them? Do you feel they understand the plight of the people?
I think government of Pakistan has already extended appeal to United Nations, and I think United Nations has just started an assessment of the flood affected areas. But what needs to be done, because now United Nations again, they will put an appeal to international humanitarian community. So I think it's before even waiting for the result of assessment, I think United Nations should go ahead with the appeal, and all bilateral, multilateral donors, they have to support Pakistan in this hardship, and also our friend countries. I think they also need to provide support in this catastrophe. It's much dire need. And secondly, we are a poor country, and more than 40% population is already poor. And this kind of catastrophe, it puts people into a very vicious cycle of poverty. Like, even if you try, like PPAF has tried to uplift, living standard of more than 97,000 families by providing them with productive assets. But we provide them with livestock or agriculture assets, but this kind of flood, it washed it away. So it's a zero-sum game as far as poverty eradication efforts are
Of course.
concerned in this country.
I think as far as poverty alleviation efforts are concerned, much more needs to be done. And of course, it's organizations like yours that are at the forefront, along with the government, along with our armed forces, to alleviate the plight of the people who have been affected by the recent floods. But floods are not the only thing. There's also drought as a result of climate change. So much more will be needed to be done. I hope the United Nations comes in sooner than later, and that many more countries understand the plight of Pakistan as well under this current crisis. Thank you very much, Nadir Barech, Chief Operating Officer, Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund, to have joined us, to have talked to us about your organization's efforts as well as the recent crisis due to the floods in Balochistan, all related to climate change. Let's come to our next segment, and that concerns a Brain Awake operation that was recently held in the capital city of Islamabad. And as different as far as the protocols are concerned, the patient was allowed to go home just in a matter of hours after this operation was done. This operation was handled by Professor Dr. Akbar Ali Khan, who's a neurosurgeon, and he joins us online to talk more about that. First of all, sir, thank you very much to have joined us, and congratulations on this Awake Brain operation. And why, I would like to understand, first of all, how did you let a patient go after a couple of hours? Is there some kind of a new procedure, some kind of a new mechanism or protocol that allows the patients to go home?
Hello?
Yes, can you hear us, Dr. Akbar Ali Khan?
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Is the voice going
yeah.
along?
So
right.
The reality is, I think it's a very good question that you asked, and yeah, I can hear you. So what I was
trying to understand, Professor Saab, how come, is there some new kind of mechanism or protocol that allows the patients to go home hours after an awake operation? Because this is first of all a delicate operation, and secondly the procedure is cumbersome as well for the patient and for the doctor who's operating on it as well. What has changed?
Yeah, so let me explain myself. So the reality is, I've been doing neurosurgery for a certain number of years in Pakistan. And as a matter of fact, when I started here, I think 4 years ago, I introduced a concept which was called as a minimally invasive neurosurgery. And that is something like you do brain surgery or spine surgery. You do it via a small cut, very refined approach, very focused. And when you do that, then the patient does not tend to have that much pain. And they have a small cut, their recovery is sooner, and then they tend to go home earlier. So when I came to Pakistan, the reality is the brain tumors were like staying in hospital for like up to 5 days, up to 10 days, with 1 day in surgical ICU. But with minimally invasive neurosurgery, I gradually reduced the stay of the patient to, for the past year, I've been doing brain tumors which have been going home within 24 hours. But then the reality is, I also introduced the awake brain tumor surgery, in which patient tends to be awake and they are talking, and you can assess them so that they don't develop any hemiplegia or weakness or stroke. And when I do them awake, so they're all the way awake through the surgery. And then at the same point, when you combine minimally invasive neurosurgery with awake brain tumor surgery, then what we achieved was actually a milestone in the 75 history of Pakistan, and that was the patient. Now I've basically introduced what is called as day case glioma surgery. That means brain tumors that could be taken out without disrupting a patient's life, and they could go home the same day. And I think I'm quite...
What I'd like to understand is, when it comes to brain tumors or any tumors, a lot of apprehension is there that there could be metastasis of that tumor, or there could be small remnants that still remain within the area as well. How delicate is a surgery, and especially a brain awake surgery, and then you let the patient go? How important is the pre-preparation of such a surgery?
Oh, yeah, so that's very important. So the reality is you have to prepare the patient quite significantly. You need to make sure that they understand that they'll be undergoing the surgery awake. It takes a lot of counseling and patients. Of course, like the way I am, I mean, I'm quite like a chatty person. I'm quite friendly to my patients. So I take them through the procedure I tell them this is how we're going to do everything. I'm actually, half the time I'm like, not joking as such, but making them laugh during brain tumor surgery as well. The patient that I did last time, I mean, most of the patients, they are doing something. The last time I asked him, because it was like 14th of August, I asked him, Pakistan ka matlab kya hai? He said, La ilaha illallah. So this is how and the other thing that, there's a two-tier answer. So the other thing that you said, of course I counsel them, then post-operatively I see them, and then they get a CT scan of their brain as well, 4 hours after surgery, to make sure everything is perfect and hunky-dory, everything is clear. If that is clear, then I speak to the patient, I make them walk around in the hospital, they're feeling comfortable, they want to go home. Of course, everybody wants to be in home rather than in the hospital, including me. It takes a lot of preparation for these kind of surgeries, and inshallah the aim is that we're going to take day-case glioblastoma surgery forward so that it becomes like something that people don't take it like a big thing that, oh, I've got a brain tumor, oh, what am I going to do, what's going to happen. Not like that. So you come to me, you're going to have a brain tumor. Most likely in majority of the cases, you go home with minimal risks because we are doing it awake and we are doing it as a day case.
But Dr. Saab, this brings to mind another very important question. When and how can a person realize that he might not be or might be having some symptoms of what you call a brain tumor? What are the symptoms that should make any person, realize that he needs to go to a doctor, to go to a neurosurgeon or a neurophysician and to have himself examined?
Yeah, so the reality is there are certain symptoms. For example, I tend to do lots of brain tumors various ways. I take them out through endoscope, through the nose. I take them out through this was glioma surgery, the brain tumors which are taken out from the top of the head. But what happens is that most patients tend to present with headaches which are not settling. They tend to have blurred vision. Their vision is not right. They tend to feel sick or they vomit. And that's kind of a vomiting that does not get better. And if your headache is not settling on normal medication, if the headache is getting worse gradually, I think, and your vision is not better, then I think these are the symptoms you need to see a doctor. Any doctor, that could be, you could go to ER or any doctor, and once you see a doctor with these symptoms, most likely you're going to get a CT scan or MRI of your brain, and that will diagnose what is actually going on. And then from there onwards, then of course, depending on what they are looking for, most people tend to get referred to neurosurgeons or they see neurosurgeons.
All right, Dr. Akbar, are brain tumors or other tumors genetic in nature? Are some other predisposed conditions that lead to tumors that people need to be aware of and prevent themselves from?
So I'll tell you exactly. So there are certain types of tumors which are related to genetics, but majority of brain tumors that I see are not related to any genetic abnormality or anything. So they tend to come randomly, and they are pretty common actually. As I say, I end up doing a significant number of cases, especially in this part of Pakistan. I think majority of brain tumors tend to come around. I mean, there are two different setups. I work in a private setup. The private setup, I think majority of the cases, brain tumors, I tend to be doing them, and there are quite a significant number. And I think the reality is, I mean, I need to thank you again for inviting me for this thing. The reality is, this is a big step in the history of Pakistan to start day-case glioma surgery, because you have to look at the dynamics, you have to look at the socio-economic dynamic as well. And I think it was the one thing which I didn't mention. Of course, I'm providing higher-end care to patients, but at the same point, the price point at which they are getting this treatment is much less as compared to if you stay in an ICU for one night and you end up spending 10 days in a hospital, then your bill can go in millions. But if your surgery is done delicately, minimally invasively, in certain cases awake, and you go home the same day, You can imagine my 10-day bill versus 1-day bill. So
True.
this is good for the people of Pakistan, like certain people who could not even afford to go to private hospitals. Now they can have treatment, higher-end care for their brain tumors.
I think it's a
private
very
setup.
important step in the right direction, Dr. Akbar. But this said, you said that there are a significant number of cases as far as brain tumors are concerned that you are operating upon. What are the reasons behind this large number of cases that are happening now? Are the people realizing now, maybe it's because of the advancement of technology, that people realize that they have a tumor compared to their predecessors or the previous generations, or are there some other factors that are affecting people and making them develop tumors?
No, so the reality is no. The people are getting more understanding of the fact that if you're getting headaches, they're not like sitting on it. Especially most educated people that come to me, they tend to go for MRI pretty quickly. So there is more awareness in the population, I can say. So the more awareness people have, they tend to come with the brain tumors sooner. The sooner they come, the better the outcome, because the tumor is of a certain size that you can take it out without causing any harm. But having said that, I get patients from far-flung areas of especially KPK and south of Punjab. They tend to come present very late because of it's because of the education level. The education is less. They go late to a doctor, and then they come with very huge tumors. But we still take them out, so that's how we do things. So we do big tumors, small tumors. But currently, as you said, I think there's more awareness in the population.
All right. I think it's very good to for the society to be aware, and it's excellent that we have neurosurgeons such as yourself, Dr. Akbar, who are here to treat the people and treat them at a lesser cost than so many other places, and of course let them go quite early as well. But nevertheless, you also have post-operative care for them as well, and ensure that they remain in good hands even once they are operated upon. Thank you very much, Dr. Akbar Ali Khan Sahab, neurosurgeon, and congratulations again on the brain awake surgery that you performed, letting the patient leave in a few hours' time. And I hope this leads to many new procedures as far as the surgical interventions are concerned within Pakistan. So congratulations again, and we'll talk to you inshallah soon.
Thanks
That
a lot.
was Dr. Akbar Ali Khan, a neurosurgeon, talking to us about the brain awake operation that he performed, and a very successful one at that, removing a brain tumor and then allowing the patient to go the very same day. It is of course economic in cost, and also psychologically much better for the patient because he has to spend less time in a hospital room. Let's come to our last two stories quickly. The first concerns polio, and the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif Saab, who has chaired the National Task Force meeting for polio eradication today, and has expressed his government's full commitment to take the practical measures to curb the polio virus transmission in Pakistan. We know that we've had certain cases in the past few months in Pakistan as well, and we also know that there is some kind of sometimes reluctance from the families to the children to take these polio drops. But it's pertinent that children below the age of 5 need to take these drops. The Prime Minister has also kicked off a nationwide anti-polio drive in Islamabad from today, and he also administered drops to children. Polio is a crippling disease. This is a fact of nature, and this what also is very important, that the children below the age of 5 need to be administered these polio drops so that they do not get this crippling disease. So it is not a scientific innovation. It is definitely, but we need to understand the importance of it for our children, for our next generation. And so people all over Pakistan need to give and administer their children these drops. This is not against nature. This is only for the benefit of your children. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan and Iran are going to sign a preferential trade agreement within the next few months. This has been decided in a meeting between the Pakistani and the Iranian side in the 21st session of the Pak-Iran Joint Economic Commission that was hosted by Pakistan between the 18th and the 16th of August 2022. Federal Minister of Commerce Syed Naveed Qamar represented the Pakistani side, and of course the Iranian side was represented by the Roads and Urban Development Minister Rostam Ghasemi, and there was a delegation of 57 dignitaries during this Joint Economic Commission meeting. Of course, it's very important because Pakistan and Iran are neighboring countries, ladies and gentlemen. We share a lot of commonalities. We share also a friendly and cooperative and collaborative relationship that has been going on since decades, and it's just a right step in the right direction as far as this preferential trade agreement is concerned, which is supposed to be signed within the next few months. This will enhance trade, this will make trade more robust between the two countries, and it will of course go in the direction of Pakistan, of course, strengthening itself economically and strengthening its economic relations with other countries in the neighborhood, and Iran is one such example. So of course we'll be looking forward to much more collaboration on the economic front between Iran and Pakistan. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. It's the last day of the week, so we wish you a great weekend, but of course a safe weekend. Get yourselves vaccinated, follow the SOPs, and prevent further spread of diseases such as COVID and dengue. Have a great weekend. We'll see you inshallah on Monday. Allah Hafiz.